Hi, welcome to Running Denver show, and I'm here with a really good friend of mine, Emily Harvey, and we're so excited, Emily, to have you on the show, so thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And what I want to talk a little bit about, Emily's going to talk a little bit about her story, but it's been really fun talking and getting to know a little bit more about her and her overcoming her own disability. And as she likes to say, I think she's an inspiration, but she's going to talk to us a little bit about what the word inspiration truly means to her. But first, tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. So I was born with fibular hemimelia, which is a big word that basically just means I didn't have a fibula bone in my left leg. And I also had a pretty big leg length discrepancy. So when I was born, my legs were about 2 centimeters different, my left leg 2 centimeters shorter. And now it's about 5 or 6 inches, I think. So if I had a foot, it would be 5 or 6 inches higher than my right side. So when I was 2, my parents elected to have my foot amputated. And got multiple opinions, but decided that was the best course of action. And I don't really remember having a foot, so it's always been my normal and how I grew up. So that's just kind of always been who I am.
And you really never let that stop you from doing the things that you want to do. You told us that you like to do horseback riding.
Yeah, so when I was younger, I played t-ball and soccer and the normal kids sports. They made me wear shin guards on both legs, which I thought was kind of silly, but apparently it was to protect the other kids in case they kicked me. And then when I was 9, I started riding horses, and I rode competitively through college, through 2 years of college.
And then it was about in 2013 you were telling me that you got the bug and really wanted to start running.
Yeah, so I moved to Denver in 2013 in January. And I had a friend living here, and she said, "Hey, Emily, let's walk the Run Into the Green." And so I did. And while I was walking the 7K, I looked around and I said, all these people are running. I want to be running. And so I talked to my husband, who happens to make artificial limbs, and we were able to get my running leg made. And I started running probably soon after that race. And I joined Achilles International, which is a running club for people with disabilities. And I've been running with them every week pretty much. I rarely miss it. And they've been a great source of motivation for me to continue with my running. So that's kind of when I started.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the things that you're involved in too, but you were talking about in 2013 you got into running, and then I'm actually holding your running leg here, and this part's kind of known as a cheetah.
Yep.
And you just informed me that this is actually about $10,000. So I'm handling this very carefully, even though I know you used it and show us how much springy it is. But interestingly enough, because I'm sure there's a lot of others with disabilities, and this is actually really hard to come by. It isn't like you can just go pick this up at your local store and be able to start running with it. I know it's custom to you, but you were talking a little bit about how difficult it is to actually get this and how difficult it is to actually even get paid for by insurance companies.
Sure, yeah. So even regular walking legs can be difficult to get paid for by insurance. There's some insurance companies that have a one leg per life policy. And then moving into sport-specific equipment is even harder because insurance really will only pay for things that are medically necessary. Sometimes you can get insurance to pay for something like a running leg if you can show that it's medically necessary. However, there are also organizations like the Challenged Athletes Foundation, which will provide grants for people to get sports equipment if they have disabilities. So, access to prosthetics is hard, and access to sport-specific prosthetics is even harder, even though it, I believe, leads to a better quality of life.
Well, that's pretty amazing. I think that's an important thing to talk about, and I have many questions for you as well, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about this too, because I think it's just fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of people are curious about it, but they're afraid to ask.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of times we don't want to expose the fact that, yes, we know you have a disability, and people feel shy about actually asking when they're actually somewhat fascinated about things, and so I'm glad that you're sharing this with us. But that's, I think, something that you bring out important. I think it's what's great about a lot of these organizations that are trying to help patients that need these to actually get them, because it's difficult out there with insurance companies. It's difficult with politics. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of money involved, and it doesn't matter where you stand politically. I hope that everybody will encourage that we continuously, with our Congress and elected officials, to provide this, because medically necessary to me is getting you healthy, and that makes things a lot better, you being a healthy person, than it is being around sickly because you can't get a leg and go out and do things to make yourself healthy. So the cost-benefit ratio, if you do the economics, is probably much better to pay the 10 grand and get you healthy than it is the other way around. But There's my little political spiel for the day. So tell us a little bit more about the lake.
Sure. So this part is the actual foot. This is a cheetah foot, which is specific for running, and it's a lot more springy and dynamic than a walking foot. It's actually kind of hard to walk on because it's so springy, but this part is the socket. So this is the part that my leg actually goes into, and it's all custom made to my leg because no two legs are shaped exactly alike. So that's kind of the labor intensive portion of the leg. And then you put it all together and you have $10,000 beautiful carbon fiber leg. They can custom laminate with different fabrics. So I chose yellow so it matches the foot. And to the point about people being afraid to ask, I definitely think that's true. And I hope that when I'm walking around or running around with something as bold as this, that it signals to people that it's okay to ask me, because if I wasn't okay with that, I would try to hide it, and there definitely are people that try to hide it, and they're just in a different place emotionally than I am, having had this since I was 2. But I've always hoped that by wearing bold legs with bright colors and sparkles, I can maybe make people feel more comfortable coming up to me and asking, because I think it's better to ask as opposed to maybe ignoring or acting like it's a taboo thing, especially with children. When I hear parents saying, no, don't stare, don't look, I think it's okay for them to look, it's okay for them to stare, it's okay for them to come ask me questions. And that's just creating a sense of comfort about my disability and prosthetics and people with disabilities in general, as opposed to saying, no, don't stare, don't look. That's kind of creating in that child's mind an idea that it's a taboo and maybe a bad thing to ask about.
Right, and acceptance on that level
Yeah.
too. And that kind of leads into the thing when you said you hope that you give people the ability to come up and talk to you about it because you want them to, and you're in a different place emotionally. So that kind of leads into the thing, because I talk to many people and I think that some people do see you as an inspiration, but let's talk a little bit about that word a little bit, because you don't necessarily see yourself as inspirational. You feel that the word is overused, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think that the word inspiration gets used a lot today, specifically with people with disabilities that are visual, or not visual, but things that you can see. So I think that everyone has challenges. Every single person has challenges that they're facing in life. And just because you can see my challenge, because it's so obvious, I don't think that makes me any more or less an inspiration than other people. And so I feel like I maybe don't deserve that word, because I think that people tell me I'm an inspiration, but I think that they're inspiring me too, because they might have a challenge that we don't see that they're overcoming. And I also think that rather than being a source of inspiration, which I see as like you feel warm and fuzzy by looking at me and what I can do, and I would rather be seen as a source of motivation for people. So if someone sees me and they say, oh, she's such an inspiration, and then do nothing, I don't feel like that's really positive. I feel like if someone says, oh, she's such an inspiration, and then they go out and start running or swimming or biking or hiking, whatever it is, drawing, if that's how they act on that inspiration and it turns into motivation to actually take action, then that's more of what I see as a positive and how I can be a positive force in the community.
I think that's a great way to look at it. So you definitely are motivating people for sure, and I know that's led you to be involved with things such as you're wearing your Colfax Marathon gear, you're an ambassador for that, and you also help direct the program of bringing more athletes with disabilities into that. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So shortly actually after I really got into running, Cree met with me and asked me if I would help promote their Athletes with Disabilities program. So I did, and we went from having only a handful of athletes with disabilities to having over 100 during Colfax weekend, split about 60% in the 5K, 30% in the half and full marathon, and one relay team that was made up of all visually impaired runners. So really just giving athletes with a disability a point person to talk to with their questions, because they do have some different questions than the general running community might have. And then having a point person for race weekend so that they know that they have someone they can go to if they have issues related to their disabilities.
Which is really wonderful about the Colfax Marathon. I'm a little biased because I've been involved since before Colfax was Colfax in many different capacities, and I'm lucky enough to be the announcer for the event. But the neat thing is really seeing everybody stand on the line, and the crowd really does get behind them. They are motivating to everybody there, especially it's kind of like, what did you do today? You know, there's people in wheelchairs and people, I've seen people with COPD that are taking 2 liters of oxygen every few minutes, and they have a trach and they're trying to push a stroller, and they do a half marathon and have every reason to be sitting on the couch doing nothing, and nobody would fault them for that. So it's great to see that you are involved in that and helping them be motivated to come out and growing that program. And it's great to see that there's events like Colfax Marathon that are opening their arms to bring them in and welcoming in. Thank you again so much, Emily, for being motivating to all of us out there and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to check out more interviews, go to runningdenver.com.